Okay, well, I will have us get started then. My name is Darcy Higgins, and I work at Rural Action. We're a nonprofit here in Southeast Ohio, and we do these virtual field trips every Friday. So they're always involving seeing something outdoors in nature, kind of like you're out there with us, we hope. So some logistical things, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I will make sure that our presenters, our scientists, get them, or you can unmute yourself and speak it yourself, but then just mute yourself again afterwards so that we can all hear it okay. But today we have a very special guests from the wilds in Cumberland, Ohio. Maybe some of you have heard of that. They have some reclaimed strip mine land up there that they use to take care of rare animals from all over the world. But today we're going to focus on hellbender salamanders, which are an endangered giant salamander right here in Ohio. So I'll hand it over to you, Paul. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone. As Darcy said, my name is Paul. I'm joined here with Robert Dixon. And like you said, we work here at the Wilds, which is the largest conservation facility actually in North America. So over 10,000 acres of reclaimed mine land used for protection of both exotic endangered species, as well as some of our more endangered native species. And here today, we're in our hellbender facility. This is where we take care of North America's largest salamander, the eastern hellbender. Now, if you all read the intro that Rural Action put together earlier this week, probably know that hellbenders are a type of salamander that live in streams. They rely entirely on aquatic environments, flowing water. And in recent years, they've become kind of threatened as we start to encroach on their habitat, kind of mess with their streams, things like pollution or habitat destruction. So here at the Wild, we try to take care of hellbenders. What we do, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go out and we collect wild hellbender eggs. We raise them here at the Wild, and then we release them back into the wild once they're big and adults. That way they have a better chance of survival, so we can help increase our hellbender population. So Robert here, he's our primary hellbender technician here at the Wilds. He's going to talk to us about the different things that we do to both find hellbenders in the wild, how we take care of them here, and then what the process is when we release them as adults.
All right, like I said, I'm Robert. I am the hellbender tech here at the Wilds. The hellbender, unfortunately, is almost completely extinct here in the state of Ohio. It only survives in a few streams that we know of. So when we collect our eggs, we go to other states, collect those eggs. We work with ODNR and some other zoos in those states. And once we gather them, we have to report how many we gathered. Once we raise them to adults, we have to take them back to the same river that we got them from. We release them in those same rivers, and then we monitor them. They are released with what basically is called a pit tag. And then we have a scanner or a reader that when we go back to that location, we can see how well the salamanders that we placed back into that river have survived from the year before. So when we go to collect eggs, come over this way. We bring our eggs back and we place them in a aquarium, and this will have airflow about every 15 or 20 minutes. It just kind of stirs them up, gives them an airflow, moves them around. We've had these eggs in here for about 6 weeks. If you can see some of them, there are some movement. We had over 200 eggs, and they started actually hatching the other day. I had 80 in one day hatch. There's ones in this tank over here. Because I had so many, I started a second tank, and these were all the ones that were actually just born overnight. I set this tank up yesterday.
Someone asked how many hellbenders you have. So you said you have about 200 eggs and about 80 of them just hatched?
They also need how many hellbenders we have total.
Total? Well, with the babies and the ones that we already have, we have right around 250 probably actually maybe closer to 300 because we did this last year too, and we brought some babies back, which I'm going to show you the next step, the ones that are a year old. And so we probably have right now about 300. We released some earlier this year before we went and collected these ones. And so far, after monitoring them a couple times, they seem to be doing well. So I'll bring you over here next to show you. Let's go out here. These ones here, and all the tanks lined up through here, these guys were a year old. So these are the ones that we've raised. You can see the difference between the newborns and the ones that are a year old. At this age here, we feed them basically with frozen tubes of minced shrimp. We defrost it and give them just a little dab, and that's what they'll live on. As they get a little bit bigger, we will change them over to a diet of red worms. We'll chop up the little red worms, and that's what they'll eat after they graduate from the shrimp. Again, these are the ones that were just born earlier this week. As you can see, there's a mess of them in there. These ones all, as of this morning, seem to be doing pretty well. If you notice their yellow belly, that is their egg sac or their yolk. That's what they'll live on. Once that yolk disappears and they start swimming around, and that's when we switch into the shrimp then, and the red worms. Actually, it'll be the red worms and then the shrimp. Our next stage, these are our 3-year-olds. You kind of see over here, you got their head sticking out a little bit. These ones vary in sizes, but the majority of these guys will be released hopefully next year as they get a little bit bigger. We like to wait till they're a pretty decent size so that they can defend themselves and they're less of a predator. When they're smaller, they can often be eaten by coons and other animals that would eat water-bearing animals. We also, as Paula said, and I think you were given literature, one of their biggest threats is us, as man. As we fill in their streams, we pollute their streams. They have no place to live, and that's one of the reasons they're becoming extinct.
Awesome. We have a few questions popping up. There's someone at home in Miss Ashton's class.
Hang on, Robert. We got some questions we're going to take care of real quick.
Go ahead.
But I don't know your name to call on you. Could the person who had their hand raised a minute ago unmute themselves and ask their question?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Darcy?
I think you're talking about me.
Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah. Can we see an adult hellbender?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that real quick? I didn't catch it.
Do you have any
Can
adult
we-
hellbenders? Sorry.
We do have some adult hellbenders. That's actually our next step that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
One of our next steps.
Then one more question. What do you call a baby salamander?
A baby salamander, in their baby stages, they're called larvae. So if you remember anything about amphibians, one of the things that makes amphibians unique is they have 3 stages. They have their egg stage, and then a larval stage, and then they transform into an adult stage. So a lot of things like frogs will start out as tadpoles, salamanders and like hellbenders will start out as larvae. They have that transformation from a young stage to an adult stage, and that's one of the things that makes amphibians very unique amongst other types of animals. So yeah, they'd be called a larvae.
Cool. So kind of like frogs transform.
Exactly like that, yes. Same stage where when they're larvae, they swim around, they're kind of like fish almost, and then as they get older, they start to develop legs, and then eventually, hellbenders are a bit unique because they stay completely aquatic, whereas most amphibians will be able to live like on land and in water. So hellbenders, they stay completely on water their whole life. They still have legs and things, so they could go on if they wanted to, but they're adapted to living underwater. But they're not fish either.
Yeah, semi-aquatic. Good word, Percy. A few other
Yeah.
people, Mary and Percy, are asking if you ever help any turtles. Do you have any?
We don't have any turtle programs here. I mean, we'll help turtles like if we find them out in the wild, like across the road or something. But we don't have any programs working with turtles here at the wilds.
And where did you get these salamanders from? The larvae or the adults?
We find them in some different locations across the state and other states. There's kind of various rivers. Yeah. We want to keep their locations kind of secret. That way they can stay safe. So that way people that maybe would want to hurt them or something can't go out and find them. They're happy just living where they are. You know, like they're safe areas. So we try to keep that location kind of under wraps, so to speak.
Very cool. Well, I see a few more questions coming in, but let's go ahead and see the big one. I think a lot of people are excited for that.
All right, you want to show them mittens?
Sure. Get the food here and bring her out.
So this is one of our adult salamanders. Her name is Mittens. You can see her just sticking out of the rock under there. Now Mittens we have as an adult because she's not releasable. So we keep her here with us just to make sure she has a good life, because if we tried to release her out in the wild, it wouldn't go well.
She may also be one that we hope to eventually will be our mama hellbender. That's the reason she's in this stream. This stream is heated. When it's plugged in, it's a running stream. And we also control the light. So it would be just like if they were in the wild. They have night and day. They have their what the temperature would be in the mornings and the evenings, in the summer and the winter. Then that way, that's going to help keep her cycle going. Where hopefully she'll be interested maybe next year in having babies. We tried her out this year and it just didn't work out. So we're hoping next year things work out a little bit better. Now with Mittens here, we have her trained to come out and respond to this bobber. And when she responds to this bobber, we give her a fish. And that is a way for us to be able to bring her out without grabbing a hold of her and pulling her out. And if we were going to release her in the wild, of course, we wouldn't use this because we wouldn't want her to go out into the wild and respond to every bobber that gets thrown into the river. She wouldn't last very long that way. So to bring her out, I just tap this. See, she'll come right out. She's responding to the bobber, so she knows she's going to get a fish. And there she goes. Now they just have a very small row of teeth, and she'll bite that. Mostly they just kind of bite down and then suck in at the same time, as you've seen she did there. And then she'll pretty much swallow it whole. They don't really chew it up. They swallow the whole thing whole. She only needs to eat once about every 30 days. So if she doesn't eat one day or doesn't respond, we don't worry about it, because when she gets hungry, she will. We offer her food Monday through Friday, give her the weekends off, and most of the time she comes right out and takes it.
Now, if you guys notice here, Mittens is spending most of her time underneath this kind of rock structure we have. So I want you all to think, in the wild, they don't have these exact things that we have here, but what do they have in the wild that hellbenders might like to live under? Do you have any ideas? One of the big things they like to live under would be rocks. So you have these big rocks in the stream. Hellbenders like to scoot underneath those rocks, stay safe from predators under there. And they come out when they need to eat, maybe when they need to move to another rock. They like living underneath those things that provide them shelter, give them protection from any sort of predators from the river, and it's helped them kind of stay like a nice area for them to be living in. So when you're out in the wild, when you're finding maybe a river or something, what do you think would happen if someone went in a river and messed up, like flipped over, moved around all the different rocks in the stream? Wouldn't be very good for hellbenders, wouldn't be very good for anything else that likes to live under those rocks as well. So the most important things you can do to try to help protect hellbenders and other aquatic animals, to leave things as they are when you find them in nature. Sometimes people go out in big rivers and they'll move all the rocks, they'll stack them up into big piles, make like a dam or something in the river. And that just messes up the entire flow of the river, messes up the flow of the stream, removes all the habitat for animals like hellbenders that need to live. So when you find things out in the wild, you find rocks that maybe you're like, hey, I can move that and make something cool with that. Just think about you're moving some animal's home, something they could use as a home. Just leave it be, let them have their natural habitat, and they'll be able to do a lot better than they would if you messed with the rocks. I saw a few questions coming in. Darcy, do you see any of those?
Yeah, great point about being aware of what you're doing to the rocks when you're playing in creeks and things like that. But a few people were wondering, how do you tell a male from a female?
Robert, is there any way really to tell male from female in Hellbenders?
The only way they really tell is if they do blood tests. By picking them up and looking at them, they all pretty much look the same. So the only way to really do is do some DNA, take a blood sample, run the test, and then you know the male from the female.
All right, only by testing the blood. Interesting. What about, are they venomous or poisonous?
Nope, they're not venomous or poisonous. They do secrete a kind of slime that they use as sort of a defense mechanism, but it's not toxic or anything. It just makes them real slippery and difficult to hold on to. That's their main way of defending themselves, but no venom.
Their main way to defend themselves is to be really slippery. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. So one of the regions are called snot otters. I believe you mentioned that in the publication earlier this week. It's one of their nicknames. It's because that mucus stuff that they secrete all over themselves looks kind of like snot. And they live in rivers, so they got called snot otters, I guess.
And it also, to other animals, has a very bitter, very bad taste. So for us, it's just slippery and slimy. We easily drop them. They're not easy to hold on to. But if another animal would try to bite onto them or taste them, they would taste really bad. So that is also one of their defense mechanisms.
Another question is, how long have you had them?
How long have we had them?
We started this project, I believe, about 10 years ago. Brian, which is the same size as Mittens, was our first salamander. So we're not real sure how old he is. They live to be 60 years old. And Brian was an adult when we got him. As I said, he's under this rock, and I'm not going to lift this rock and disturb his home. Mittens, again, she's somewhere right around 15 to 20 years old. And because she's not one that will release, like I said, we're hoping that these two will become parents and we'll be able to raise our own batch of hellbenders rather than have to go out and collect the eggs.
All right, another question is, how do they poop and what do they eat?
Got how do they poop and what do they eat?
Well, they poop basically just like any other animal. As they move along, it'll come out back by their tail. We net these tanks out every day. So we have some volunteers that help us out. If we don't, one of us will do it. But we'll go through, we take and we run the net through every tank. And we also we take a little spongy and wipe off any brown, which is any algae that would start. So that way we get rid of any waste that was in the water. We also do water samples, water chemistry about once a week to make sure the pH and the nitrates and those kind of things are at acceptable level. And we'll do water changes about every 2 weeks or so on every tank. They're all on a cycle. And as far as what they eat just about anything you can find in the water that's aquatic. Crayfish, very small fish, tadpoles, those kind of things. Here we feed them small pieces of fish.
Awesome. Another question is, how do they breathe underwater? A few people wondered maybe they have gills. How does it work?
So actually, if you all remember earlier this week, let's see, she's not out right now, but if you remember earlier in the thing earlier this week, one of the nicknames for hellbenders was lasagna lizard. That has to do with how they breathe. So a lot of amphibians, like salamanders and hellbenders here, they don't breathe exactly like we do. They like to absorb their oxygen through their skin. And the reason hellbenders are called lasagna lizards, because on their side, they have all sorts of flaps of skin. Here, like lots of folds, lots of layers, makes them look kind of like lasagna. The benefit for that is that they absorb all their oxygen through their skin. So having all that extra skin on their sides creates extra area for them to be able to absorb more oxygen. So that's why they need to stay moist, because having moist skin helps them to absorb oxygen better. They absorb their oxygen just from the water, kind of sort of like gills, but not exactly like gills. But they absorb basically through their skin. That's how they breathe. And all those extra layers, all the lasagna appearance, helps them to breathe it better so they can survive better.
That's a pretty crazy way to breathe. If you do ever catch amphibians in the wild, you're not going to catch something like a hellbender. They're very rare and they're endangered. We don't want to, but sometimes you might find a frog or like a redback salamander in the woods. You want to make sure your hands are wet, or you pick them up on a leaf or something like that, because some of them do breathe through their skins and it can really hurt them. Let's see. I see a few people have their hands raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Can salamander? I have one question.
Go for
Were
it.
there any ancient salamanders bigger than the hellbender?
Possibly. They're talking about salamanders bigger than the hellbender, like in ancient times.
There's only one salamander that's larger than the hellbender, and that's not in the United States. Outside of the United States, and unfortunately, right now I do not remember the name of the salamander.
I got it. There's the Chinese giant salamander, who's found in regions of China. They can grow up to like 5 feet long, I believe. There's also a variation on that, the Japanese giant salamander, that grows up to around 4 feet. And then we have our hellbenders, which grow up to, the largest has been around 29 inches, so about 2.5 feet or so. So our hellbenders aren't quite as big as the biggest ones in the world, but they're still respectively large. And as far as ancient salamanders, I mean, it's possible that there was some ancient form of a salamander that got really big, but I'm not sure of that right offhand. I know a lot of other animals like insects, they had giant versions back in prehistoric times, so it's possible. But that is a good question. That's something I might look into, actually, just out of curiosity. But I'm not sure of an answer as far as prehistoric ones at the moment.
Thank you. Liam, what is your question?
How long and how big can they get?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How long and how big can they get?
So hellbenders, on average, they can reach up to, and the largest was about 29 inches. On general, they're usually around maybe 15 to 20 inches or so. And as far as how big, do you have a weight estimate for that, Robert?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Because it varies.
Yeah.
You can have some that are thinner, some that are heavier. They're not real heavy. I would suppose that if we were to weigh Mittens O'Brien here, it'd be right around 2 pounds. They don't get real heavy because, like I said, they spend all their time in water and they eat crayfish, and they're mostly just fleshy. So there's no real weight to any of them. And again, it depends. Some of them don't get to be full size like that. Some of them are just like humans. Some of them are just small. Some of them grow bigger. Some of them are heavier. So all that just kind of varies.
You mentioned a few things about how the water needs to be clean of different pollutants, like nitrates and things that wash off the soil. So we had a few questions about water. Can they live in salt water, and what pH do they thrive well in? And some people might not be familiar with pH, but pH basically means how acidic, or the opposite of acidic, alkaline your water is.
So they're asking if they can live in salt water and what their preferred pH level is.
They do not live in salt water. They need fresh, quick moving. Still talking?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And our pH level, like I said, we do our water chemistry. These are all the chemicals that we use. Like I said, we would prefer when we do the pH that it's somewhere around 7.5. So when we do our water testing, we try to hope that it comes right here in the light brown to orange. But anywhere from right around 7.4, 7.5, that's an acceptable level or lower.
And that's around the pH level you'll find in most freshwater streams. If you start getting much higher than that, it starts to get more basic.
And then if you get lower than that, it gets more acidic, which means it's more like lemon juice or battery acid or something like that.
Which hellbenders don't like.
Yeah, they don't like that. We don't like that. So basically, any kind of water that you'd probably like to drink that would taste good and that would be healthy for you would also be healthy for a hellbender.
It's true.
All right, so pretty neutral.
Yeah.
Water is what we're going for. Okay, we got a few more raised hands. Aaliyah, what's your question?
How many colors, how many colors can they come in? How many colors?
They're asking how many colors they can come in.
They're all basically the same. It's kind of a brown or black. Some of them have spots, but they're all that very, very dark color. So it helps them blend in to the bottom of the river or stream that they're in. They blend in with the rocks and the mud. Along that same line, I think you've probably been told or maybe read about it, they don't see very well. So they rely on a lot of the sense of smell and feel, vibrations and those kind of things, because they have very, very poor vision.
That's pretty interesting to feel to navigate by feel. It's got to be different living in a creek. There's someone from Ms. Ashton's class with white headphones on with her hand raised. What's your question?
What is the biggest salamander that you've had?
Asking about the biggest salamander that we've had.
The biggest one we have is the one you just saw a little while ago, mittens, and then, like I said, the male is the same size that you didn't see. So when they get to be about, like I said, about a fourth of that size, or about this long, about yay big around, that's when we release them back into the wild. That's when they should be big enough to take care of themselves. So we usually don't keep them to be full-size adults unless, in these cases, we have no intention of releasing them.
How big can they get?
They're asking how big they can get. They can get up to 29 inches, which, can you give us a measurement of like what 29 inches looks like?
About that long.
About that big or so, roughly. There's some variation like there is in people, how different people can be different heights. Hellbenders can be different lengths too. But in general, they can be around 2 feet or so, maybe is a good estimate.
Yeah, I think we talked about that a little already. Percy, what's your question?
When a hellbender dies, what do you do with its body?
They're asking what we do with the hellbender's body when it dies.
Well, basically, we preserve it. We let the veterinarians, we have a veterinarian staff here at the Wilds. They will do tests on it to see if they can determine maybe why that salamander died. And then we'll bury it just like we would any other insect.
All right, we might take just a few minutes over here because I think we have a few more good questions, but if anyone needs to leave, that's fine. Devin, what's your question?
How do you know how much to feed them?
They're asking how we know how much to feed them.
Basically, it's trial and error. We have just a certain amount that we feed them once a week. If they eat all that, we know that we've given them enough. If we go to clean the tanks the next day and there's still food left at the bottom of the tank, we know we overfed them. So over time, we figured out how much to give each salamander, and that's what we base it on. In the wilds, they eat, like I said, they only have to eat about every 30 days, and their daily intake is basically whatever they could find. Their mouth opens pretty wide, so they can eat a good-sized fish or a good-sized crayfish. So if they're swimming around and they see a fish and they're hungry, they'll eat it. It may be a bigger fish, it may be a small fish. So to answer your question, that varies. But we have a specific amount that we give them here based on what their needs are and what we've seen them eat.
Awesome. Willow, what's your question?
How old can they get?
They're asking how old they can get.
They can live up to 60 years. As far as we know, we just know from what we've studied. Of course, we've never had any here 60 years old. But again, in the wild, it's just like humans. They may have some kind of a disease or a deformity or an issue, or it may be a climate thing, or it may be bad water. So, or they may be eaten at a young age, or like I said, develop some type of sickness, just like we would. So, but if a salamander stays healthy, lives as long as it can, we know that the salamander can live up to 60 years. Now, has there been some older? Possibly. And like I said, several may not live that long. But we do know from past studies that we have salamanders that have lived up to 60 years.
Awesome. I think we should have 2 more questions. One is someone from Miss Ashton's class, but I don't know your name. So if you've raised your hand, go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay. My question is, if people think this is really interesting work, how do you get a job like this? How do you become a hellbender technician?
Well, that's an interesting story. I've been here at the Wilds for 9 years. And of course, that really wasn't my goal when I first come here. In fact, when I first started working here 9 years ago, I'd never even heard of a hellbender salamander. Eventually, 4 years ago, I joined the ecology department here and became a restoration and wildlife technician, which means I do a lot of the field work and outdoor work. And I started doing some work with the salamanders, became fascinated with them. The position as a hellbender technician opened up 2 years ago. So after volunteering for a couple of years, I moved into full-time technician about two and a half years ago.
Is there a certain educational study that people should pursue if they're interested in this kind of work?
Basically, when you go to college or go to your secondary schools, there's not necessarily a specific hellbender classification. You just go in and you study wildlife, whether you be an amphibian expert, whether you focus just on salamanders. In my case, mine was park recreation and wildlife, along with some law enforcement. And so I basically learned an overall blanket about outdoors and those kind of things. And my education with the hellbender was, like I said, volunteering, coming up, working on a part-time basis, studying, doing my research on them. And I'm in no way an expert, but I probably know a lot more about the hellbenders than your average person. And that's how I became a hellbender technician.
Cool. So a combination of studying biology or wildlife or natural resources fields and doing some volunteering. And Paul, you have some volunteer opportunities coming up, maybe for some of the slightly older listeners. Do you want to talk about those at all?
Yeah. So I'm starting a new program here at the Wilds this fall. It's called TACN, stands for Teens Acquiring Knowledge in Nature. TACN is an animal that we have here, in case you didn't get the acronym for that. But basically, if you go on the Wild website, if you look under volunteer opportunities, it'll describe the program a little bit. It's geared for middle and high school students. It offers a way to volunteer virtually through different citizen science type activities, as well as some possible activities to have here on site. If you go check that out, the application should still be open. If not, you can get in touch with Darcy and have her put you in contact with me, and I'll get things squared away. But it's a way to kind of help you learn more about what we do here at the ecology department, to help you have some of your own activities you can do at home to assist us with our research, and even possibly coming out on site to help us directly with some of our projects. If you're interested in that, again, check out our website or email Darcy and have her put you in touch with me. And just keep an eye on different volunteer opportunities that might be coming up. A lot of our volunteer opportunities are geared more towards adults, so it's something to keep an eye on as you get older. But even now, just learning more about the environment, participating in some of our different activities, things like this, ways to learn about different animals that are out here, ways that you can help protect them just by simply protecting their habitat or educating others about them. There's all sorts of different ways you can start learning about nature now, start to build your interest, get involved in different activities, and then as you get older, study it more and start doing more work related to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I dropped the link for that in the chat if anyone is interested in learning more, or of course you can email me. Okay, I think we're about out of time. Thank you so much everyone for coming today. We will share the recording soon for anyone who missed it. And next week, we're going to talk about things you might be scared of for Halloween, like snakes and spiders. So, yeah, do you think you could maybe show us the big salamander mittens one more time before we go?
Can we see mittens one more time? Let's do it.
Someone asked, why won't you release mittens into the wild?
They're asking why we're not releasing mittens into the wild.
Mittens, it's called Mittens because she was born with no fingers, no toes, and we just feel that she would have a very difficult time surviving in the wild. And so we've kept her here so we can take care of her. She'll become our adult salamander. And like I said, hopefully she'll be the one that'll eventually give us her own baby hellbenders. Now, see if we can get, oh, she says no. Usually they don't bite. She's usually pretty used to me, but she may have thought my finger at that time was a fish. So yeah, she usually doesn't snap like that. So I caught her off guard.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's it for today. Have a good day, everyone. Feel free to send us any pictures or comments afterwards. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.